To summarize, a strong data culture fosters shared ownership between business and data teams, and you have the psychological safety to fail, experiment, iterate, and you have a curious organization that is always willing to ask questions, challenge assumptions. Successful data initiatives also thrive when data is part of everyday conversation and it's not an afterthought, right? So that's another key takeaway. I think next few years will be less about building infrastructure, and it's going to be more about unlocking value in the ways that we feel almost invisible to the end user. It's like we are moving from data as a report to more like data as a teammate. That's the shift I am most excited about. And honestly, it's a bit of both, right? I would say there's a bit of hype and there's a bit of real value. And there's a lot of hype and no doubt about it, right? But there's also some real tangible value if you approach it with the right mindset. At a high level, we're all about practical AI and not flashy AI. We are not building AI for the sake of it, and we are not jumping into that bandwagon of creating a chatbot because it's cool. The real question we are asking is, where can AI help us move faster and be smarter or scale what we already do well? AI is more like a force multiplier, and it's not a magic wand or a cure-all, right? If you have solid data practices in place, AI can help you scale them. And if you don't, it'll just automate the mess that you have. So we are staying very optimistic, but grounded at the same time.
Welcome to today's episode of Beyond Brilliance, where we will be diving deep into the world of data strategy with our guest, Jai, an accomplished data leader whose career spans banking, fintech, SaaS, and biotech industries. We'll explore how organizations can effectively build data strategies, overcome common challenges, and create data cultures that drive real, meaningful business outcomes. Let's start with your journey, Jai. Can you walk us through your career path from your early days to your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. Before even I start, JK, thank you for inviting me to the Beyond Brilliance podcast, and many congratulations on starting such an enterprising podcast. I'm really pumped for you and your team. Thank you so much. Absolutely right. To dive into my career, it's been quite a journey for me. I've been very lucky to have worked in some really exciting industries. I worked on product companies, I worked on software services companies, I worked in fintech, biotech, and banking, all of which have given me like a front row seat to see how data can drive real transformation. So I actually started out on a very hands-on basis. I have built a lot of data pipelines. I've designed a lot of cloud data platforms, worked on a lot of machine learning projects, and had real impact on revenue, customer growth, and engagement. So that technical foundation really shaped the way I think about problems today. Over time, I found myself gravitating towards strategy, connecting the dots between data, product, and business goals. So I started leading more cross-functional teams, aligning efforts across departments, focusing on data to unlock the real potential. These days, I lead teams that actually span across the realm of data engineering, advanced analytics, and AI innovation. But honestly, one of the things that I'm most proud of is building strong teams and nurturing future leaders. I really value in creating a culture of ownership and making data a true competitive advantage for the businesses. So yeah, my path has been one of a steady evolution, if you will, from being a builder of systems to being a builder of teams, now building a lot of data strategies and ensuring that businesses unlock the real value of data. At the heart of it, I'm still a builder and I'm passionate about using data to drive smarter decisions, building better products, and creating meaningful impact.
Great introduction, Jay. Today is going to be a fun exercise when we learn about data and what the impact of data can make towards organizations and why strategy is important. We'll start with setting the stage, unpacking a data strategy. Jay, the first question I have for you is, to start, let's break it down. For many businesses, data strategy can be a bit of a buzzword. How do you define data strategy, and why is it important for modern organizations?
A data strategy is just a game plan of how companies collect data, manage their data, analyze the data, and use the data to meet its business goals, right? So that's what it is. At the heart of it, it's how you collect data, how you manage data, how you analyze data, and how you make use of that data to meet your business goals. It's fueling your growth, and it's also helping your business operations. A solid data strategy is one that helps companies turn all raw data into insights that they can really act on, powers things like innovation, better customer experience, and boosted productivity. Without one, the businesses tend to end up being served with siloed data, underused data, and they kind of miss out on a ton of opportunities.
It's very insightful. Next, move on to the next question. When you're first developing a data strategy, what are some of the key steps or things you really need to focus on to make sure it's set up for success?
Sure. The first thing I always emphasize is making sure the data strategy aligns with your overall business goals. It's all about connecting the dots between what the company is trying to achieve and how can data support, or how can data help you get there. For example, if the focus is on improving customer satisfaction, right, the strategy should be geared towards capturing customer feedback, tracking customer satisfaction metrics, and ultimately helping to optimize that customer journey of yours. Next, we can dive into data governance. And this is huge because you need to have a solid framework to make sure the data that you're collecting is accurate, secure, and easily accessible across the organization. So without proper data governance, things can get really messy, data can get fragmented, it can become inaccurate and unreliable, and you lose the trust in business quickly if you don't have a solid, grounded data governance program in place. And lastly, it's about building the right infrastructure, whether it's picking the right tools for data storage, whether it is setting up smooth data pipelines for your ETL, or making sure your security is airtight. The technology stack definitely has to be scalable and flexible enough so it can grow along with the business. So you want to ensure that these three components are addressed in any strategy that you're trying to put in place.
Fantastic. Now that you have the foundations ready, how do you start executing the data strategy? What are the first steps? How do you make sure it's being followed consistently across the organization?
Yeah, that's one of most challenging and difficult things, right? Execution is always key.
Agree.
Yeah, execution is where a lot of strategies can stumble because it's all about constant monitoring and tweaking. As the business evolves, your strategy needs to evolve. As the culture in the organization changes, your data strategy needs to evolve. The first things I try to do is I try to establish a solid data collection process. You've got to figure out exactly what data you're gathering and making sure that it's being captured in a structured and an organized manner. For example, you want to make sure that every customer interaction is being tracked consistently across all touch points, whether that's through your website, your customer service, or even social media for that matter, right? Next comes creating clear data flow. It's all about making sure that the data moves smoothly from collection to storage to analysis without getting stuck in silos or creating bottlenecks. Once the data is flowing, you need to make sure that you need a team that's dedicated to analyzing it and turning those numbers into insights that decision makers can actually use. So this is where the role of data analysts come into play. It's not about just setting it and forgetting it, right? You need to have regular checkpoints, and you want to keep tweaking your data strategy as you see the business evolve. We work, particularly what I do in my line of work is I work very closely with cross-functional teams to make sure the insights we are pulling from the data are being acted on. This might mean that I'm having like regular checkpoints with them, monthly business review meetings or quarterly business review meetings, where I'm working closely with them to ensure that whatever data asset I'm putting in front of them is actually empowering them to make decisions and wise decisions at it. That way I know for a fact that whatever problem I solved is complete, and I have that feedback loop coming from them. Yeah, so that those are things I ensure is in place when I'm executing a data strategy. Those are the things that actually set you up for success.
Very true. Very true. Now let's move on from there and let's talk about some real world applications. Can you share a specific example of a project or an initiative where strong data strategy really made a massive impact and helped solve a very tough and complicated business problem?
Sure, I actually want to go back in timeline here because there was one project that comes back to me vividly, right? This is when I was at a bank. The problem was basically we were trying to move people from traditional channels to more digital native channels. In a simple term, we didn't want customers taking up long lines in our brick and mortar store. Instead, we wanted them to use our digital apps. We wanted them to use more digital native channels. That was the goal. The challenge was that a lot of our customers were still using those old methods because the clientele that we were serving were more in the demographic that were resistant to change. Right? So the challenge was a lot of our customers were still using older methods like phone support or in-person visits, and we wanted to shift them to digital platforms so that we can provide service faster and in a more efficient way. Our data strategy was key there. We pulled all the data together from multiple sources, everything from customer preferences to their interaction history, and used it to identify who are good candidates to the digital shift. Then we used targeted campaigns to guide them to those digital channels. We ran campaigns in terms of providing them incentives to download the app, start depositing their first checks using the app. So, so the result was pretty good because there was a significant boost in the digital adoption, which not only helped us improve the customer satisfaction, but also it helped us streamline some of our operations in the backend. So that is one project that comes to my mind where there was a sound data strategy and there was a business outcome that realized real potential of data that we were able to collect and act on. So yeah, that's one project that's so vivid in my memory.
Data is powerful. What it can do for businesses is truly magical. Let's further dwell into future of data strategy. As data continues to evolve, so must the strategies. How do you see the data strategy changing over the next few years? Any trends or innovation businesses should be getting ready for?
Yeah. I mean, this is that one buzzword that's going around, making everybody wake up at night, right? Yeah, the future of data strategy is definitely going to be shaped by AI and automation. As more companies are diving into machine learning, AI, and the growth of large language models, data strategies are going to be becoming more predictive, and in some cases even more autonomous. What does it mean to businesses? Is you'll have a lot more real time decisions based on data, and sometimes even you won't have the human in the loop. So there's going to be a lot of autonomous decisions made by these intelligent systems. That's one trend I'm seeing in the market, and also one trend where we are internally also looking at making those kind of changes in our organization currently. And another big trend I'm seeing is people demanding for ethics and privacy. So more and more data we collect, right? People are becoming more aware and demanding transparency about how this data is being handled. So businesses are going to have to be more responsible when it comes to protecting data, ensuring that they are using this data in a more ethical manner. So going forward, I think these are going to be core part of any solid data strategy. If it does not address AI automation, if it does not address ethics and privacy, those data strategies are going to be found wanting. So I encourage all of our fellow leaders to take a note of these trends and make their specific shifts in their data strategies if they have to.
I would say plus one. That's definitely going to be part of my core data strategy. With that in mind, let's switch gears a bit. You've had the front row seat to how data challenges play out across industries, from banking to fintech to biotech and to SaaS platforms. So let's talk about that. What's common data challenge that you've seen across different spaces and how have you tackled it?
Yeah, that's a easy one. The most common challenges you see is fragmented data systems. Anywhere you go, business functions are siloed, and the applications or systems they use tend to be very siloed, and the data resides in those siloed environments and never brought into a unified system to make sense of how your business is performing on an overall basis, right? So I see that that is the biggest problem anywhere you go. Fragmented data systems. It's almost universal, regardless of the industry, whether it's banking, fintech, or biotech. It's the same across organizations. So organizations often find themselves with siloed data that makes it tough to get a unified view, which in turn affects your overall decision making and operational efficiency within the organization. Whether it's customer data in banking or clinical trials data in biotechs or even user behavior data in software as services platforms, it's not if it's not unified and accessible, it's not going to be driving effective decisions. So that's one big problem I see: siloed data systems. How do you really solve for that problem, right? The way you solve for that problem is you want to implement cloud native AI enabled platforms. You could go with vendors like Azure, Snowflake, Databricks, and create a single source of truth where you're trying to consolidate all of your data systems and creating that single source of truth, so all of the business functions can always talk the same language, and the technology is powering their decision making, right? That's what you want to at the end of the day. uh, and you also want to focus on data governance and ensuring that the data that you put in place is reliable and trustworthy. And the second thing that comes to my mind is cross team alignment, right? You want to make sure that your business functional teams are also always in touch with data teams and they're providing feedback loops. And the other thing you want to make sure is you're having user adoption as you go building your data assets. You want to make sure that there is you're driving user adoption to it. I can give you one example where we had in one of my previous roles, we had sales, marketing, customer support all working in different systems. Like they had different sources, and we had a CRM system, we had a campaign management system, we had a marketing system. So they were all fragmented, completely fragmented, and everybody were uh, producing conflicting reports, and the strategies were found wanting in that kind of a situation, right? So what I did there was I ended up centralizing all the data into a single platform. I built a custom dashboard that tailored to each department needs and implemented like real-time data access across the teams. The result wasn't just accurate reporting, it led to deeper understanding of the customer behavior, and also led us to create faster decisions, and faster and more data informed decisions. And the across the board we were able to ensure that everybody is talking the same language, and it's not like my data is right, your data is right. So you don't never get into arguments of such. Rather, you shift the organization to become more strategic and goal oriented, and not bicker about whose data is right. So the takeaway here is siloed data is a massive barrier, but when you break those silos down, and when you pick the right platform, when you have the right governance structure, you're ensuring your organization is always making smarter, faster decisions at scale.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Very thoughtful. How do you change and how have you noticed the maturity of data and strategy across the industries that you work?
Wow, that's a great question. It's interesting because the core ideas of data management remains the same. Like, having good governance, having good quality and accessibility, they pretty much stay as standard across the board, right? What changes is how the business approaches data maturity, and the strategy really depends on the industry that you're working. For instance, if it comes down to the level of risk the organization is willing to take, and also the regulatory pressures they are under, and how fast are they moving from an innovation standpoint. I can give you vivid examples. If you take banking and fintech, for instance, the data maturity in these industries are heavily linked to risk management and regulatory compliance. So there is always going to be major focus on security, auditability, traceability, and making sure that the data that you play with is always traced back at any point in time. So the strategies here tend to be more compliance driven, and innovation is at a slower pace. Generally, in banks and traditional setups, the innovation always takes a backseat because governance, compliance, regulations kind of thwart these data teams. They all, I mean, it is by design, right? They have to be uh, compliant with CSIL, they have to be compliant with anti-money laundering, they have to be cognizant of Banking Secrecy Act, they have to be cognizant of GDPR practices. So every data has to be bulletproof when it comes to traceability in banking and fintech. And I can give you an example, right? One of the banks I worked where when we had to roll out a new dashboard, that meant we had to at least have 3 layers of compliance checks before we even validated data logic. If I'm going to put a metric in place, I have to go through 3 layers of compliance check to validate the logic that I'm implementing. It actually really pays off because once you're up and running, it becomes the gold standard for decision making, and it also improves the finance and operations of a bank. When you shift gears to a biotech or a pharma, right, it's a bit different. The data here has to be treated with both a scientific. It's both data here is both a scientific asset and also a compliance risk. You're working with clinical trial data. You're looking at lab results, all sensitive stuff, right? So your strategy has to ensure data integrity and also meet the strict regulatory guidelines like good manufacturing practices, good lab practices, and HIPAA. The focus is always on supporting research, patient safety, and making sure everything is ready for FDA scrutiny. So this again is another heavily regulated and compliance oriented industry. On the other hand, right, you have a stark contrast when it comes to a product company or a software as a services company. Here it's all about speed, experimentation, and driving revenue. The expectations around data maturity are more fluid in this sort of industries. The real focus here is on providing real-time insights that can quickly influence product decisions, your A/B tests, and user retention. So it's more about acting fast on data, and it's not more about the perfection or quality. It's like how fast can I act on the data, and how fast can I iterate on my product increments. That's where the focus goes. I can give you an example, right? In one of the SaaS companies I work, we ran a product analytics loop every week. We'd gather usage patterns, we prioritize features, and we feed that right back into our development sprints. So that's how important how fast we'll have to move in a product or a platform based organization. So you don't wait for a perfect data model to land. It's all about speed, iteration, and making immediate business impact. So if I want to break it down by industries, right, the way I would do it is when it comes to banking and fintech, it's about control, it's about risk management, making sure everything aligns with the regulations. When it comes to biotech or pharma, it's about balancing the scientific integrity with strict compliance requirements. When it comes to a product company or a SaaS, it's all about speed, experimentation, and driving growth. And yeah, speed comes to my mind when you talk about SaaS companies. Even though the tools and tech are pretty much similar across industries, how you use them really depends on each industry's maturity and what they really want to achieve from a data strategy. So that's the variation that comes along with these industries. So the basics remain the same, but you just tweak the way you approach it based on risk, based on the environment that you're operating on, and based on what the company is after.
That's a very nuanced answer. I can see that you've worked in many different industries, and I can see the value you bring to this conversation. Thank you so much for that. With that stated, you have a variety of experience across diverse industries. What's one of the biggest mistakes you see companies making when coming to being data driven?
Yeah, this one's pretty easy, right? A huge mistake I see all the time is confusing data availability with data usability. It's a big one. I see this pattern repeat any place I go. Companies pour a lot of money into tools, buying the best tech stack, setting up cloud platforms, hiring the best engineers, but they forget the most important part, which is aligning all the data work with a business goal. So they end up with technically advanced setup full of dashboards, but insights is always a question mark, right? They're just not actionable insights that you provide. You build tons of dashboards, you build tons of analysis, and it's more like you're having a shiny car, but you can't figure out how to handle or drive it, right? That's what I see. I tend to see everywhere I go. In a lot of cases, it's not a data problem. It's more like a lack of having clear strategy on how you want to act on the data that you're collecting or you're analyzing. The focus is more on getting the infrastructure right, but they actually forget about why behind the data. It's all plumbing and no purpose, and that's how I put it. Right? I can give you a real example. Right? I worked at a company where we had moved all of our platform to Snowflake, had tons of Looker dashboards everywhere, and even we had AI pilots running. But when I asked the customer experience team what KPIs they usually track for success, they couldn't give an answer, a straight answer to me. They couldn't agree on what really mattered. So the dashboards weren't telling a story, they were cluttering up the place. So we hit a pause on all the new builds, and I spent a month almost talking to them about, I spent a month talking to different teams to define right metrics, the decision making processes that they will employ, and creating more of an accountability from a, if I'm spending time, I want to make sure that I'm spending time on the right problems, and the problems that I solve is actionable, right? So that was a big turning point for me in that particular organization. So another big mistake I see companies doing is treating data more like an IT function or a back office function. So often data teams get siloed, they get disconnected from product, engineering, marketing, or customer teams. That's a recipe for missed opportunities. At one place I worked, we took a pretty different approach, right? Uh, we ended up embedding data analysts directly into go-to-market teams, customer success teams. That way, the data wasn't something that they really reported on. Rather, it was something that they lived and breathed. They could act on it right away and continuously improve the process based on the feedback loops that they're receiving from these functional teams, right? To summarize all of these points together, right? Being data-driven isn't about how much data you have. It's about how connected this data is to the decision-making process. That's number one. And then you don't just buy fancy tools or invest in the best tech stack there is. You want to have shared goals, and you want to build data fluency across the organization. That way, the teams have the confidence in making the decisions based on the data that you put in. And also there's a trust factor that is emanating throughout the organization. That's another part. And true data-driven companies treat data as a core business competency and not a back office thing. That's a key, right? You don't want to treat data like IT. Data needs to sit, and data needs to have a table in every strategy conversation, every board meeting, and every decision-making juncture. So At the end of the day, data should make things clearer and not more complicated. If people can act on the insights you're providing, then not really data driven, you're just data busy. So I would stop there, and I could go on all day talking about the different problems or different mistakes organizations make, but for time's sake, I'll stop there.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next section, which is culture and its influence on data. So, in your experience, how does culture really influence the success of any data initiative?
Yeah, sure. Culture is everything when it comes to making data initiatives work. You can have the best data stack, you can have the top tier engineers, state of the art ML models, but if the culture isn't there to support data informed decision making, none of it will stick. What I have found is that the key differentiator in successful companies is where they treat data as a shared responsibility. It's not something that lives within the data team. If the mindset isn't there across the whole organization, most of the efforts fall flat. Let me give you an example, right? At a SaaS company I worked, we were all about democratizing data. We had plenty of dashboards, maybe 200, 300 dashboards built by various different functional teams, but the usage across the board was very, very low. And so instead of just building more and more reports or more and more dashboards, we kicked off a data enablement initiative. We embedded analytics leads in cross functional teams, held bi weekly insight reviews with our stakeholders, offered lightweight data literacy training. Uh, that's when people's mindset started shifting. Instead of asking this question of, can you pull this number for me? Hey, here's what data is telling me. Can you please explain or explore this together with me? So that kind of change, right? That kind of shift from passive consumption to getting to an active collaboration can only happen in a culture where there is a lot of value put in curiosity, feedback, and teamwork, right? It's all about creating that open, collaborative environment. On the flip side, I've also seen environments where a culture was more top down and risk averse. Leaders would have often made their decision, and they're just asking data to confirm their decision. In those places, data are more of a compliance tool than a strategic asset. So innovation mostly stalls because no one feels comfortable exploring new ideas or challenging status quo. Another huge cultural element is how companies handle failure. In world of data, not every model is going to land. Not every hypothesis is going to get validated. So in high maturity cultures, what I see is failures are treated as more like a learning opportunity. But in a lower maturity environment, people avoid experimenting because of a fear, and they're afraid of getting blamed. So that fear factor plays a huge role in lower maturity environments from an experimentation standpoint, from a failing forward standpoint. So, for example, I can give you an example, right? So we launched this AI-based prospecting tool in our current organization. We expected it to miss the mark the first time we launched it, and it fail, right? But what we did was we set it up as a learning loop with our sales and marketing team. We welcomed the feedback that they provided, and we were able to iterate quickly and end up almost driving 20 million in new revenue. That wouldn't have been possible in a culture that punishes early mistakes. So we were very successful and fortunate to work with an organization that was okay to us failing and pivoting as business evolves, right? So that's very, very key. To summarize, a strong data culture fosters shared ownership between business and data teams, and you have the psychological safety to fail, experiment, iterate, and you have a curious organization that is always willing to ask questions, challenge assumptions. Successful data initiatives also thrive when data is part of everyday conversation and it's not an afterthought, right? So that's another key takeaway. And leaders also need to model right behavior in their teams in terms of asking thoughtful questions, embracing nuances, and celebrating learning just as much as success, right? You want to amplify that every failure has is one step closer to success. Like if you have that mindset, that's going to be awesome to not making your team truly data driven. So culture is so crucial in that aspect. I also wanted to quote like Peter Drucker, right, who famously said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Right? In data world, it's no different. If you want your data initiatives to succeed, you want to start with the right mindset before diving into the metrics. So I call this like metrics mindset over metrics, right? You want to have that clear mindset before you go and define your metrics. So that's how I would define it. Like culture is plays such a crucial role. Culture heavily influences data strategy and the execution part of it.
Yeah, that was a really great deep dive into how culture shapes successes, and failure of data initiatives. I really appreciate these real world stories and the emphasis on the mindset over metrics. Really powerful. Let's move on to the next section, scale and structural challenges. Let's shift gears and talk about operating at scale. When you're building a data strategy for a fast growing company, what are the key pillars you focus on to make sure it works?
Yeah, I typically I have a playbook which is always going to talk about four key pillars, right? You want to have scalable infrastructure that can scale as the business scales. You want to have aligned metrics, like the metrics that everybody in the organization can agree with. The third thing you want to focus on is data enablement and self-service. That way, your data teams don't get bogged down with a lot of ad hoc requests. You're enabling the business teams to be more self-servient, and you want to create deep strategic partnerships with your functional teams. So if I want to go down and explain each one of them, scalable infrastructure, right? What does it even mean? You want to basically lay groundwork with solid infrastructure. Think of cloud platforms like Snowflake, Databricks, or Azure, or AWS, and you want to look at tools that can automate your ETL pipelines like dbt or ADF. For example, at one point, right, in one of my previous organizations, we were trying to scale at a very fast pace. And what we had to end up doing was we had to ditch all the old ways of working. So we had to re architect the entire data pipeline using modern data tools. And we were able to cut the data latency by 50%. That basically freed up more valuable time for the organization and the data team to focus on analytics rather than putting our daily fires, right? Prior to us moving to a more scalable infrastructure, every single day we were praying and hoping that our pipelines won't break and we were able to ingest the data to provide insights to our organization, right? This was something that it was a recurring theme. Without having a scalable infrastructure, we wouldn't have been able to address that problem. That's the first thing, first and foremost thing that you want to ensure that your data team is equipped with. You need a scalable infrastructure so your operational needs are met and it's not something that your teams can get bogged on. And second thing I focus on is getting aligned metrics. As teams grow, each one starts defining their own metrics of success. Sales can have a view, marketing will have a view, product will have another view, and engineering will come and say this is their metrics. So there's going to be different views across the organization. So you don't want to go down that path of whose metrics is right and get into these nitpicking and having low impact conversations. What I do to avoid these kinds of situations is making sure that I can set up shared KPIs and dashboards across the board. I can give you an example. At one company where I worked, we worked with the sales, marketing, and finance team, and we ensure that we all agree on a common funnel metrics, which actually helped us reduce the confusion and made the conversations more strategic rather than bickering over whose numbers are right. So that's very, very important. You need to have aligned metrics across the board. The third thing that I would focus on is data enablement and self-service. You don't want your data team to become a bottleneck. Instead of focusing on building every ad hoc request that business is asking, you want to ensure that you are enabling your businesses to write their own reports. You're running analytics accelerators. You're creating templated dashboards. You're creating data dictionary, giving data literacy programs. You're training them. So you want to make sure that your business is comfortable in terms of owning the data, and also you're able to ensure or instill confidence in them in using the data for decision making. So I will say data enablement and self-service is very, very key to unlocking your data team to focus on structural problems, foundational problems, rather than daily operational needs. You want to ensure your business teams are equipped with that. And then the fourth thing is for your leaders to do is have strategic partnerships. Data cannot live in a silo. You've got to build strong relationships with functional leaders. I can give you an example. When we launched a customer targeting tool in my current organization, I worked directly with the sales and marketing throughout the development. So the feedback loop was always continuous, and their feedback basically shaped the tool. And because they were involved, the adoption rate was at least 3 or 4 times faster than other tools we had launched prior to this. So that's also very, very key. It also comes down to how you can influence these teams to make better use of the data assets you're building. So I would say I would underscore the strategic partnerships and relationships that you can build with functional leaders is going to be very, very key when your organization is growing at a fast pace. So to recap, my core pillars would be scalable infrastructure, aligned metrics and shared truth, data enablement and self-service, and creating deep strategic partnerships with business. So if you get those four right, your data strategy becomes more a growth accelerator and not just a reporting function. And especially in high growth companies, that's the difference between you surviving and scaling, right? So I would focus all my energies on building on these four core pillars.
That's a very thoughtful answer, very deep. Let's move on to the next question. In terms of balancing short term wins compared to your long term infrastructure rewrites, which is quite tough, especially when you're scaling very quickly and working with very limited resources. How do you approach this as a data leader?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. It's definitely one of the toughest challenges, right? Like, how do you balance between long term and short term tactical wins? It's always a very tough one. What has worked for me in the past is becoming or thinking more like a product leader, right? Every investment should solve today's problems while also laying groundwork for future needs. I call it like a dual track strategy where it's about running two parallel work streams. One where you have tactical wins. These are smaller time frame items, and you have strategic foundations, right? These are longer horizon. This can take anywhere between a year and 18 months to manifest itself, right? When I talk about tactical wins, these are quick wins, right? You could build a quick dashboard, consolidating multiple different systems, build a quick executive dashboard that helps you in terms of getting a comprehensive overview of how your business is functioning. You could do churn predictors. You can create marketing campaign insights. So these projects, when done right, they can bring immediate value. So over a period of time, if you stack those tactical wins, you start building trust and you actually show quick ROI, and you establish data team as a key player in the business. So you want those wins to be very visible and impactful so you can get the buy-in from your leadership as you quietly work in the background for your structural foundational aspects which take a longer horizon, right? So the second thing is strategic foundations, right? You want to make sure that you're putting a tech stack in a nice place that it can scale and grow according to the business. This is where you focus on long-term investments. Like this could be like you're modernizing your data warehouse to become more like a lake house, or more like you're building a streaming platform, or you're building scalable governance programs. These are projects that can take a long time, and there is no way to show quick ROI, but these are crucial for future scalability and compliance. So you want to make sure that you're always moving in lockstep, right? You're having your tactical wins, you're focusing on strategic foundations, and you basically run these two work streams in parallel. I can give you an example. At a previous company, our marketing team was struggling with siloed, unstructured data, and they had some urgency in terms of finding out how their campaigns were performing, right? So what we did was we quickly built a MVP marketing dashboard using our existing pipelines. It was a more like a short-term win, right? We were able to at least answer 80% of the questions. Maybe that 20% was always found wanting because of our traditional stack. We were not on modern stack. We couldn't provide them real-time insights, but we were able to get away with it. And they were also able to get away with running their operations. What we did was, in the meantime, we also were working in parallel to re-platform from our legacy ETL tools to something like a DBT for better version control and scalability. This helped us reduce the technical debt over time and also enabled self-service analytics for the team. The key here is like we were able to deliver short-term wins first, and we were able to instill confidence and also get that political capital to tackle deeper long-term work. So you want to always pair with tactical wins that unlocks your business to move forward. At the same time, you're quietly working in the background on foundational aspects that would allow you to move faster when it comes to future. So again, when it comes to deciding between short-term buckets versus long-term one, I always ask these following questions, right? Will this unblock revenue, or will this reduce our risk posture? If S is the answer for that question, then it's a short-term focus. I want to quickly jump on it. I want to quickly unblock my business, and I will do anything at my disposal to solve that problem quickly. And if the question is more like, is it going to reduce my maintenance costs over time? Will it make analytics easier down the road? Then that will be a long-term play. If the answer is yes for that question, that's more like a long-term play. And sometimes I also ask, can we build ugly first and then refine it as we go along? Because we want to prove value, and then you want to focus on building long term. So I call this like start small and then you can scale smart. Like if you put this to dual track strategy in action, oftentimes you will come out of it very successful, because you have your quick wins, and B, you're also ensuring that you're putting right foundation in place for future growth and scale.
Got it. So you are balancing quick wins and deeper long term investments. Fantastic. That's just a very powerful insight, Jay. Delivering today while building for tomorrow. And of course, none of this happens without the right people and the structure behind the scenes. Great answer. We're going to go to the next section, org design playbook, my favorite section. In this section, we are diving deep into something that's crucial for scaling and delivering high impact results, org design. Now, we've talked a lot about data strategy, but building the right team to execute the strategy is just as important. You've worked across a variety of industries, banks, fintech, SaaS, and biotech. So I'm really curious, what's your approach to structuring data and AI teams in such a diverse environment?
Absolutely right. A great data org just doesn't happen because you hired smart people. It's really about designing teams intentionally based on what the company demands and what growth means for that organization, what goals they have set for themselves, and what culture the organization is fostering. Right. So my approach is like I call it like mission aligned modularity. Essentially, what you want to do is you want to embed teams in functional areas. They solve real problems, but also you have central teams that ensure consistency, governance, and reusability. So let me break it down to you. So first, I focus on few core principles. So number one is domain proximity. I believe in embedding analysts, data scientists within business functions, whether it's customer experience, product, marketing, or engineering. So they're talking the same language as their stakeholders. So they're ingrained in the trenches of the business nuances, the language the business speaks, right? This helps them deliver faster insights and also solve real world problems. So that domain proximity is number one. Number two is basically platform centralization. We centralize engineering side of things, right? Like the infrastructure, architecture, DevOps, MLOps. You want to make sure that this is a central function. So every project or every data asset that you put in production is consistent and streamlined. And I call this more like a hub and spoke model, right? So structurally, you have a centralized governance function, but you have embedded teams on the ground delivering value as a result of the foundational work that the hub is creating. So I can give you an example. Maybe I'll walk you through like how I would approach it in different varieties, different industry types, right? So for early stage companies or SaaS companies or product companies that are in their early stage, I try to lean into hiring or creating teams that are generalists. Like these are people that can do a bit of everything, right? These are people that can extract data, they can write pipelines if needed, they can build dashboards if needed, they can run models if needed, they can create insights if needed. So you want generalists who can solve specific problems. So speed is always the key here. And once the organization scales, then you can think about defining specific functions and you can have dedicated teams for each function. So let's say we flip the switch to a scaling fintech or a product company or a platform company, right? That's when you start introducing clearer roles. You want specialized teams like analytics engineering, data engineering, data science teams, ML engineering teams that are basically putting models into production. So you want to have those discipline focused teams when you have sizable scale and sizable growth. And in case of an enterprise where you have almost, if it's a publicly traded company and if it's an enterprise if you're in a regulated industry like a bank or a biotech, governance is critical. Then that's when you start on top of having your data engineering team, on top of having your analytics engineering team, on top of having your data science organization, you also want to layer it with a data governance team. This particular organization will have data stewards, compliance liaisons, and you want to always ensure that the data governance team is working very closely with your legal compliance and ensuring that all the data assets that you put is compliant from a regulatory standpoint. So that's how I would see it. For early stage companies, hire generalists. For scaling fintechs or product companies, start defining clearer roles. Once you get into big enterprises or regulated industries, on top of having discipline oriented teams, also layer in data governance teams so that you are always compliant with the regulations that is in place. Lastly, there are other factors also that break or make a team, especially in data. So you want to give lean in on giving considerations on career pathing. You need to make sure that there are clear career tracks for both individual contributors and managers and leaders. And you also want to make sure that you are having regular cross-functional syncs with functional teams. That way, you're always solving the most burning problems for them, right? And the other thing you want to also do is do some sort of an internal branding for your data team. That way data is always treated as a strategic partner and not treated more like as IT. So I would advocate for focusing on internal branding. It's very, very important. So treat org design like a product. If you want scalable success with data and AI, you need to build a team that's modular, aligned with the business, and standardize in terms of infrastructure. Whether it's banking, fintech, biotech, or SaaS, the structure changes based on the context, but the foundation remains the same everywhere. You need clarity, you need autonomy, and you need shared ownership of the mission between business and data teams.
Fantastic. All right, let's shift gears a bit. How do you actually define and measure the impact of a data team? Because let's be real, data work isn't just about the volume, how many dashboards you've created or how many rows you've processed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, a lot of organization makes a mistake on this aspect, right? They measure for volume. That's not the right approach. What for me, there are three key focus areas when it comes to measuring a data team. How many business outcomes were impacted because of your data? And did you a data enabler? How good was your data enablement skills? And what's the trust you've instilled in business teams to act on your data? So those are three key areas that I focus on when I'm measuring data teams: business outcomes, data enablement, and the trust they've instilled in their business to act on the data that they're providing.
Got it. Let's break down that a little bit. How do you measure business outcome?
Yeah, for me, right, business outcomes are always the North Star. Data teams should work always to tie back to concrete business goals, whether that's revenue growth, cost savings, risk mitigation, or improving customer experience. So data shouldn't be interesting. It should be revenue generating or risk reducing. For instance, right, when we rolled out a new ML powered marketing tool, we didn't just celebrate that it worked technically. We measured its real world impact. Like, is there significant increase in the pipeline volume? Did it boost engagement from a customer standpoint? So that's the level of linkage we're talking about. We're not talking about, hey, did it run in sub-second? Did it crunch all the customers that are coming through your pipeline? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking more about, uh, did it impact the bottom line? That's the level of integrity that you want to have when you're trying to measure.
That's huge. Turning data into direct business impact. What about data enablement? How do you measure that?
Yeah, data enablement is more like you want to make sure that your business is able to take data on their own hands, right? And they're able to create whatever insights or reports that they want to glean out of the data that you're providing. For example, it could be like building a centralized semantic layer that is very, very intuitive. It could be putting data dictionaries. It could be rolling out a data literacy program where you saw the analytics tool adoption increase by 40% or 30%. That's a clear indicator, right? That the team was just not delivering insights, they were empowering business teams to be more self sufficient. So that's the level of integrity that you want to have when you're measuring data enablement as a metric.
Self sufficiency is the key. So, how do you measure trust in data?
Trust is everything, right? If people don't trust the data that you're providing, then it's no use. So I look at things like data quality scores that we get, our pipeline downtimes, like how available our data was, and how many data issues are getting escalated from the business teams. So those are some of the key indicators that will tell you how businesses are seeing your data from a trust standpoint, right? In regulated industries like banking or biotech, trust is even more critical. For example, at a previous organization of mine, we introduced data quality monitoring and data stewardship roles, which helped us reduce the escalation by at least 50%. So this really increased confidence in data for financial decisions and audits. The other way to also look at it is basically looking at the usage of your data and how many times did somebody look at your daily dashboard? How many times did they directly change or shift their strategy based on the data insight that you provided? So that inherently can be a proxy to the trust that they have in your data. So those are key things I use to measure trust in data.
That. How do you structure your KPIs to track all of this?
Yeah, I can give you a few examples, right? When I say you want to enable data-driven go-to-market strategy, how do I measure it? So the increase in the pipeline, like, if you can set a target, okay, I have to increase the influence pipeline by 20% through AI-driven segmentation. So that could be a KPI that can measure whether you've made your GTM really, really data driven. That could be a KPI that you can track. And for instance, if you're trying to measure self-service, you can look at, like I said before, you can look at the dashboard usage across product and customer service teams. You can look at whether your functional leaders are putting out reports and insights on their own using the semantic layer that you build. And when it comes to improving trust in data, right, you can always go back to your quality scores. You can say that the goal for the data team is to reduce quality issues by at least 40% quarter over quarter. Those are KPIs that are really, really impactful. And over time, they will show value in terms of providing trustworthy data to your entire organization. And if you want to accelerate delivery, you can always say, like, okay, today I get to insights in 10 days, right? It takes 10 days cycle time for me to get to understand the current business cycle. Maybe you want to reduce that cycle time from 10 days to 3 days. So that could be another clear KPI that you can start measuring. So those are some of the ways I would say how you can define a KPI to measuring a business outcome.
All right. So to sum it up, the impact of the data team isn't just the amount of data flowing through, it's how much better the business operates because of it.
Exactly. When you can tie directly to business KPIs and empower others to make smarter, faster decisions, you've created a trusted data ecosystem. And you're not just supporting business from that standpoint, you're basically trying to amplify the business, right? So that's where data teams need to go. And that's where you earn your team to be. And that's the position I always strive in all organizations I go.
That's the sweet part. Now, let's talk about moving from insights to action. How do you ensure those insights actually get used and acted upon? And where does the storytelling fit into that?
Oh, that's a great question. Because let's be real, right? Data doesn't lead to action. You need people to act on whatever insights you're providing. You can build tons and tons of beautiful dashboards and only to not have anybody use them. So for me, the first thing to make sure is the insight is tied to a real decision. And if I can't answer the question, so what? Then it's not ready for prime time. So I stop there on my tracks if I don't get a compelling answer for that.
Got it. So, how do you actually get them to act on it?
The secret sauce is storytelling, right? Storytelling is where you turn charts into, wow, we need to do something about this moment, right? I think of it like this. Every good story needs to have 5 ingredients. That's the recipe. So you want to have context. What are we trying to figure out in the first place? That's the context part of it. Second, you want to have a conflict. Like, what did we find that was so unprecedented or that was concerning to me? And then you want to create an insight. What's really going on here? Like, the data needs to tell that, like, that insight needs to be provided by the data. And what's the implication? Because why should business matter? Like, for what insight you're providing. And then you will also have to have an action where your data team is prescribing what to do next. So to rerun the order, it's the context, it's the conflict, it's the insight that you're providing, it's the business implication it has, and then the action that you're prescribing your business to take. So if you're able to process, or if you're able to put forth your insights in these 5 steps, then it makes for a powerful story, and it can really resonate with the business audience that you're targeting this message to.
That's the end game, right? Making
Yeah.
sure data is actionable.
Yep, that's exactly right. Delivery matters too, right? You've got to speak the language of your audience. For instance, right, if I'm getting into a meeting with an executive, showing them 10 exploratory graphs is not going to cut it. At that point in time, you're all about, okay, what's the headline? What's the decision you made? You want to make sure that you're tailoring your message or you're tailoring your story based on the audience you're interfacing at that point in time. Let's say you're talking to a product manager, that person will be very interested in looking at all the graphs, the usage, the customer behavior, what A/B test results are showing. So basically, you need to tailor the story depending on who's in the room. And you want to make sure that you're able to connect to that audience and you provide the right context and the right story.
That's a really smart approach. Anything else you would like to add on this?
Yeah, the follow through is also crucial, right? One thing is we never close the loop. So that's another thing that I would think about. After you share an insight and you've implemented a change, you must circle back to see what the actual results were. So that's where you build trust. More importantly, it creates the culture of people don't just tolerate data, they're actively relying on it to make decisions, right? That's very, very key. Like, your follow up is what is going to build trust. And also, your follow up will also inform you whether your hypothesis is right or wrong. So that's one key aspect. You don't stop just providing insights. You also want to follow up on how it was acted on, whether the decisions that were made based on that hypothesis got validated.
Absolutely. It's all about continuous loop of insights and action. At the end of the day, data doesn't just speak for itself. You have to tell the story, connect it to what matters, and close the loop. All right, let's switch gears a bit here. That was some great insight into turning data into actionable insights. Now we're going to dive deep into the future, which is our next segment, AI and the road ahead. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
AI is absolutely everywhere right now, but I'm curious, what's your take on AI in your strategy? And is this more of a hype, or do you really see value in this?
Oh, wow, that's a great question, JK. Yeah, AI is definitely everywhere. And honestly, it's a bit of both, right? I would say there's a bit of hype and there's a bit of real value. There's a lot of hype and no doubt about it, right? But there's also some real tangible value if you approach it with the right mindset. At a high level, we're all about practical AI and not flashy AI. We are not building AI for the just for the sake of it, and we are not jumping into that bandwagon of creating a chatbot because it's cool. The real question we are asking is, where can AI help us move faster and be smarter, or scale what we already do well? Those are the key questions I'm trying to answer with AI. Where can AI help us move faster? Where can it make us smarter? Or where can it help me scale what I'm already doing well?
So you're really looking at ways AI can actually add value rather than just jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah, and yeah, you can get caught in the hype cycle and trends, right? For instance, we've been using AI to automate repetitive tasks in analytics, stuff like summarizing dashboard trends and drafting experiment recaps, or even generating SQL for natural language prompts, right? It's not about replacing the analyst or the data scientist. It's more about giving them a head start so they can focus on thinking and not just typing, and they're not bogged down in busy work, right? So that's the key. Like wherever AI can be an ally for our analysts to focus on what real value they can add, that's where we want to employ AI at this point in time.
That's really interesting. So AI is more of an accelerator and not a replacement.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely right. Another area we are exploring is AI to surface insights proactively, like anomaly detection that explains why something changed and not just, hey, your metrics are down 12%. That's where the real value lies, right? Making insights more accessible and actionable for non data folks. But on the flip side, we've also had conversations and people ask us questions, hey, ChatGPT cannot prepare this dashboard for me. I mean, we laugh about it, right? Because it's not there yet. It's great for generating ideas or speeding up brainstorming, but it still needs guidance, context, and a human in the loop to make sense of all the thing it is outputting. So I don't think it's there yet, but it's slowly getting there.
You're giving me all sorts of bad news, my friend. It's the human element that makes the AI work, right?
Yeah, exactly. AI is more like a force multiplier, and it's not a magic wand or a cure-all, right? If you have solid data practices in place, AI can help you scale them, and if you don't, it'll just automate the mess that you have. So we are staying very optimistic but grounded at the same time. And we are asking, where does AI naturally fit into, and where are we going to do better with AI, right? Like I said, it's always about how can AI help me scale faster? And it's not about if AI can solve all the problems of the world.
Makes a lot of sense. Let's look ahead. What excites you the most where data and AI is going to be in the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh man, there's a lot to be excited about, really. I feel we are at an inflection point where data and AI are finally becoming core drivers of strategy and not just a back office function. What excites me is the shift from being reactive to being so proactive. And right now, a lot of what we do is answering the questions like, what happened last week? What is the churn telling me? But with AI, especially large language models and real-time analytics, we are moving towards systems that can tell you what's happening right now and what should you do about it before you even ask that question, right? That's where the real magic is.
I love that. So instead of just reporting data, AI will be saying, here's what's coming and here's how you're going to act on it.
Exactly. For instance, right, imagine like a CRM or a product analytics tool not just letting you know numbers, but also saying like, hey, this group of users are going to churn next week. Here's why they're going to churn, and this is the intervention technique to avoid it. So that will be a game changer. Instead of telling me what has happened before or giving me a hypothesis to validate. It's going to tell me intervention techniques to ensure that that cohort of users are not churning. And another thing that I'm really excited about is democratization of data and insights, right? AI is definitely lowering the barrier for non-technical folks. They can now start asking smarter questions, exploring trends, and making more data-informed decisions without even writing a line of SQL or having to interpret 5 different dashboards. So that is another exciting part. The consolidation of all the data and insights in a chatbot is quite powerful to help business functions and business functional leaders to not worry about data interacting with data tools, right? It's really lowering that barrier to entry. So I'm very excited about it. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to consume data and AI assets as we keep moving forward.
That's really huge. This is like opening data up to so many more people in the organization now.
Exactly. And longer term, I think we'll see data and AI more embedded in product experiences, not just more like support tools, but also features as themselves. Think AI co-pilots for users, real-time personalized recommendations, and dynamic experiences that evolve as people engage with your product. How cool will it be? Like, I can personalize your experience based on the features that you're using. And I make the front end or the UX be more suited for your preference. If I am a marketing person, then I'm caring more about the campaign engagement and the analytics that goes with it. And if I'm a sales enabled person, I'm only all about leads, where my leads are heading. So if I can personalize the product experience based on the persona I am that is interacting with that product, then that's quite powerful. So that intersection of data, AI, and product design, I think that's where the real magic is going to happen. And I'm increasingly seeing those kinds of experiences manifest in a lot of modern tools today.
That's incredibly exciting, Jay. I want to play devil's advocate here. I'm sure there are challenges too, right?
Yeah,
What are you
of
keeping your
course.
eye out for in terms of ethics, governance, and data quality?
Of course, those still matter, but overall, I think next few years will be less about building infrastructure, and it's going to be more about unlocking value in the ways that we feel almost invisible to the end user. It's like we are moving from data as a report to more like data as a teammate. That's the shift I am most excited about. I'm thinking like people are going to start treating data as their own teammate rather than a reporting function. So yeah, that's another big thing I'm excited about.
That's a new mind shift I learned today. I'm with you. Data is a teammate that we often have to appreciate going forward. That's going to be the game changer for how businesses operate and grow, I believe. Jay, thank you for joining us today. It was a wonderful conversation. Your insights on strategy, team design, and the future of data have been incredibly valuable for me and for the listeners. You've given us a lot to think about, from breaking down silos to building momentum and embedding AI into everyday experiences.
Yeah, thank you so much, JK, and it's been a pleasure. And it's a great conversation. I really enjoyed digging into these topics with you, and many thanks for inviting me on the show. And congratulations on this new podcast of yours. Thank you so much.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. We'll be back soon with more conversations on leadership, technology, innovation, and the people to drive it forward. Until next time, it's a goodbye from all of us here at Beyond Brilliance.
Thank you.